Joining us now is former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's a CNBC contributor, sits on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. Just in terms of the rising case counts, Dr. Gottlieb, that we report every single day, is there anything you're seeing in the data that shows a peak or that we're getting close in any of these hotspots across the country, or does it just continue to get worse and worse?
Not yet. I think we're still going to have a ways to go, probably a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, until we start to see some peaking in the infections. You're starting to see new cases declining in some of the states like Arizona, but that might be more of an indication that the states are hitting their upper capacity on their ability to do testing. So you might be seeing them exhausting their ability to do testing rather than actually peaking in the number of new infections. Hospitalizations are likely to hit about 60,000 hospitalizations this weekend. That puts us back to where we were at the peak number of hospitalizations during the last wave of the epidemic, when the epicenter was New York City.
What does that give us any indication about the death rate? Because we're still nowhere near there. I think we're topping 800 deaths per day over the last few days. As you know, during the peak here in New York, it was around 2,000 in this country, or at least more than that. Is there any hope that because of the skewing of the age and the knowledge around treatment and methodology that we won't get back to those kind of mortality numbers here?
In-hospital mortality has absolutely declined, although we're not able to measure it yet. It's going to take some studies, some retrospective studies to, sort of ascertain exactly what the in-hospital mortality is. There's no question it's come down. In-hospital mortality during the last wave of the epidemic was about 20% for all patients admitted, about 35% for patients admitted to the intensive care unit. I wouldn't be surprised if that's been cut in half with the introductions of anticoagulation, the reluctance to intubate patients, the use of steroids on critically ill patients and on hospitalized patients, the use of remdesivir, a directly acting antiviral, and other innovations in care that we've introduced. So we have reduced the number of people who are going to succumb to infection as a percentage of those who are admitted to the hospitals. Now, if we end up infecting a lot more people and admitting a lot more people to the hospitals, and it does look like this wave of the epidemic is going to exceed the number of cases we saw in the last wave, some of those gains we have made in the improvements in medical care will be offset by just the sheer number of people who get admitted to the hospitals. Right now, we hit 977 deaths yesterday. We're likely to eclipse the 1,000 mark that we hit last May. But hopefully we won't see the kinds of numbers that we saw at the peak of the epidemic in New York City. And we've done things like try to protect nursing homes and other congregate settings where you have a lot of vulnerable people. So hopefully people who are more vulnerable to the infection aren't going to be infected at the same rate that they were during the last go-around.
And of those three data points, cases, hospitalizations and deaths, which one should governors or mayors be most focused on as they make their decisions about whether to reopen or reverse economic policies?
I think we have to watch hospitalizations, because ultimately the question of whether or not you can reopen is going to turn on, do you have the capacity in your medical system to deal with the outbreaks and the epidemics? And that really turns on the hospitalization rate. Do the hospitals have some residual capacity? The hospitals in states like California and Texas and Florida have tremendous capacity to expand the number of beds. And so I don't think that they're at the upper limit of what they can do for a little while yet. But when you look at smaller states like Arizona, Alabama, South Carolina, you have to be more worried about those states. And those states also have dense epidemics because they don't have the same residual hospital capacity. And moving patients around between states is very difficult. The other state we need to keep an eye on is Georgia. Georgia looks like it might be at an accelerating pace in terms of the mounting number of cases there. And that could be another epicenter of spread pretty soon if they don't get that under control better.
Yeah, and fighting the mask mandate as well. Wanted to ask about New York, because Governor Cuomo announced this afternoon that all parts of New York are going to be in phase 4 on Monday, including New York City. So things like the zoo can open up. It's mostly outdoor activities. Movie production can begin again. How worried are you about places like New York, which have really crushed the curve, but with the outbreak flaring everywhere else, Cuomo's warned many, many times that we're vulnerable?
Well, look, there's going to be a resurgence at some point in the states that have brought the infection rates down. It's inevitable that there's so much infection around the country, you're going to see reintroductions into these states. But by bringing the infection rate down and getting testing way up, they have the capacity to identify the outbreaks early. I think they're going to be able to keep up with it for a period of time. But as we get into the fall and winter, there's a real risk that we see a more confluent epidemic across the whole United States, like we see with the flu every season, where the epidemic starts in one region and it spreads across the entire United States. I don't know that these states, as we get into normal flu season, are going to be able to keep up with all the COVID infections that are getting introduced into these states. Because remember, everyone who presents with a respiratory illness, everyone who presents with a febrile illness come the fall is going to need to get ruled out for COVID first. So everyone with parainfluenza and mycoplasma and RSV and influenza is going to need to get ruled out for COVID. That's going to overwhelm the system. So we face a lot of risk heading into the fall. And frankly, I think many of us hope we'd be at a better point right now and not have this much infection that we're bringing into the fall.
Dr. Gottlieb, just quickly, how incrementally positive was the data we got from Moderna earlier in the week?
Positive. Every card that we've turned over on these vaccines has demonstrated that it's possible to develop a vaccine construct against this virus. So I think we should be reasonably optimistic that we're going to be able to come up with a vaccine in a really rapid time frame by historical standards. Hopefully by early 2021, maybe by late 2020, it would be available for select populations.